With us now, we've got presidential historian Craig Shirley. He's the author of the book Rendezvous with Destiny, Ronald Reagan and the Campaign That Changed America. Craig, thank you so much for being with us to celebrate Ronald Reagan's birthday. You are the man that, well, you write a Reagan biography every 3 or 4 minutes. So I think you're...
He just wrote one.
He just wrote one while he was waiting in between break, and they're all great. I've read them all. On this moment when the Republican Party is at its lowest approval level, well, since Gallup's been taking the poll over decades, what's the message for Reagan Republicans?
Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that, Joe, because if you go back to 1975, when the Republican Party association in this country was about 18%, he actually suggested that the party come up with a new name because it had become so sullied after Nixon and Watergate and all the other attendant problems. I think that if I think you're right, is that there's a permanent schism now in the Republican Party between the insiders and the outsiders. Reagan, of course, came from the ranks of the outsiders, who was able to consolidate the insiders into a new Republican Party and break apart the old New Deal coalition with the influx of Reagan Democrats. I think that what is going to need to happen is that you're going to have to get an inspirational leader who comes from the ranks of the populist Tea Party Reaganites, who is going to come up with a compelling message that's going to motivate that side of the party to take it over and consolidate it in time for 2016.
I wonder whether we're wasting our time, though, when we talk about the next Reagan, the next Reagan, the next Reagan. That's kind of like Boston looking for the next Ted Williams. Ted Williams had the swing. Only Ted Williams had the swing. Only Ted Williams had the eye. Ronald Reagan was able to be conservative because he had extraordinary personal skills that didn't scare the hell out of independent voters.
And you're absolutely right, is that there is no other Reagan. Men like that don't grow on trees, neither do men like Eisenhower, Franklin Roosevelt, or some of the other great presidents that we've had. Is that the next compelling leader, there can be a compelling leader with a Reagan-esque type of message, but Ronald Reagan himself was singularly unique.
Mike?
Well, you know, what you just said is kind of interesting. It hadn't really occurred to me.
Just kind of?
The selling of a program, whether you're talking about trying to sell reduction in welfare, whether you're trying to sell welfare reform, or whether you're trying to sell eliminating, you know, the carried interest, you know, so hedge fund guys pay more in income tax. The language and the demeanor of the person selling it makes a huge, for instance, Ronald Reagan, Ted Cruz could never do what he's doing today. If Ronald Reagan sounded like Ted Cruz, what am I saying here? You get what I'm talking about?
Actually, and let me, Craig Shirley, and I know you'll underline this for me too. It's even more important for conservatives to be better at messaging and selling and demeanor, which I've been saying for years as Republicans scare the hell out of everybody. Craig, because you know what? It's easy to say, you want health care? We'll give you health care. You want this benefit? We'll give you this benefit. Right. Social Security, Medicare, don't worry. We're not going to touch it. Don't be mean to old people. It's a lot harder to actually tell people what they need to hear, which, unfortunately, as Tom Brokaw has said, over the next 30 years is going to be, instead of giving people things, telling people what has to be taken away in terms of benefits so we don't bankrupt ourselves.
Right. Let me go back to Mike's point, is that, you know, Mike Reagan himself said, you know, without my philosophy or ideology, I'd be just another out-of-work actor. He knew that it was what he was saying. He said, I'm not a great communicator. I just think I'm trying to communicate great ideas. But, Joe, to your point, is that he had a message that was compelling not just to Republicans, but also to Democrats and independents, and creates a new Republican Party. And if you think about liberalism in America, in America, in this country today, and in the history of liberalism, is that the message from FDR forward to Obama has essentially been, give me power so I can do good things for you. Is that so? You have an emotional response. So, well, that makes sense. So I'll vote for this guy. Reagan's message in 1980 was, give me power so I can give it back to you. You have to think about what he means, and what he's talking about in 1980 and why the message is missing today is that he's saying, put me in office so then I can implement a conservative, populist federalism view of the world and send power away from Washington back to the country where it belongs. And in 1980, he said often, he said, don't trust me, trust yourself. He truly believed that the individual was more important than institutions.
Republicans have said that since. They haven't acted that way, though, unfortunately. Julie.
Right.
Craig, you know, Reagan has become kind of the go-to former president that everybody from Obama to John Boehner to Paul Ryan references. And I'm curious what you think. Do you think his actual policies and legacies are being accurately reflected by this wide spectrum of people, or are they being misconstrued a bit?
You know, Julie, it's a terrific question. Is that all presidents go through ups and downs in history and revision.
Harry Truman was... What are the revisions with Reagan?
What are the good revisions or the bad revisions?
The revisions of his policies as they look back on him and as they conservative.
The idea he was a great compromiser. Right. He was a compromiser as long as he could get 80%. That's how he typically compromised in Sacramento and in Washington. Is that or that he was just this happy-go-lucky guy? Is that this is a man who was fought. For everything he ever achieved in his life, he had to fight very hard for.
I think, Craig, what Mika was actually asking you, and that was a great point, was what do you think about the Republican consulting class and the Republican establishment wing and people that have spent us into debt from 2001 to 2009 and ran away from Reagan's small government policies, wrapping themselves in Ronald Reagan's aura?
I couldn't agree more, and you and I have talked before about the influence of what you would call the new political bosses. We learned in high school physics, and I remember that when I wasn't sleeping in high school physics, the teacher saying that power can neither be destroyed nor created, it can only be moved around. And inside the Republican Party, the power is moved from the state party chairman to the delegates to the elected officials, and now it's moved to the consulting classes. They are the new political bosses inside the Republican Party, and they have totally misshapen Reaganism and conservatism and really drained the fun out of American politics, quite frankly.
Craig, Shirley, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you very much.